Hey everyone, this is Ellie Mae with Silhouette Secrets Plus, and today I have a tutorial for you on tracing an image and cleaning it up. The first thing I want to say about this tutorial is it is not going to be edited. I am going to go through the process that I would use for this particular image. Every single image that you trace could be a little bit different or require steps in different order to get the results that you want. So that is why you don't see exact trace step by step for that work for almost every image. It's not a magic button. There are different things that you can utilize within the Silhouette Studio software to trace. Now here, I'm going to jump off. Here is a look at the image that I am going to be sharing with you. I received permission from a group member to use this image as they're trying to clean it up, and I thought it would be a great example. But we get this question a lot. Now you know my Norton. Again, I'm not going to edit this. So you saw that pop up. I think it's very important that it's not edited because there is often movie magic that happens in videos. And if you watch closely, it is not always what you see on the screen that their results in their final project show. So oftentimes you are seeing something that they may have done 5 or 6 times in the background, and it's not their first time or the time that they first started recording that video. So you really have to watch some of the videos that you're watching to see what really happens in them. So I want to give you that step-by-step in real time video of what I would do to simplify this for a cut file. Now the user said they would be using this on HTV for a shirt. So that is the size that I am going to be working with and keeping in mind when I design this. I say that because if you are trying to trace and cut a file that is very, very detailed and you are trying to make that successful with a 3-inch decal, you can run into some issues there simply because this is quite a detailed or distressed sketch of this. It was originally a photograph and then turned into this sketch. So it is quite distressed here. I think it looks awesome, but it would cause some issues with cutting because of all the little artifacts. There's a lot of edit points, as you'll see when I go to trace this. So I'm going to start from opening the original file that was sent to me, and we will go from there. So it's not going to be a quick video is what I'm trying to say, but I think there's going to be a lot of information that will help you in being able to trace files or to see what might be needed to clean up files when you are tracing them for projects like this. So this is the image I'm going to work with, but I'm going to go back to the beginning and open it from the original because there's a few things to point out there. So I'm going to close this. One other thing I will say is that another part of this real life step-by-step is going to be that sometimes it takes the computer longer to process large images and especially traced images with a lot of edit points. So you will often see this. This is actually a JPEG file, so it will not auto trace when the software opens. I will add additional links in the description below on some of the features that I am discussing and talking about, so you could go and do even more in-depth tutorials on those specific features, but I'll try to explain it as I go as well. So for this one, your computer may run when you are working with these larger files or larger traced files, especially if it's distressed. So even my computer, that is a lot more than the average user's computer because I teach classes and use multiple devices, is going to have running in the background, and it is going to affect how long it takes to process what I'm asking it to do. Closing tabs in your Silhouette Studio software or closing additional programs such as Google Chrome is a huge hog of data resources. So if you're on the internet at the same time with a web browser or any other heavy data programs, that can affect the processing time of your software. Not just Silhouette Studio software, but other software programs too. So I want to make sure of that before you get started, because if it gets into locking up the computer, you want to take some steps back and close as much as you can. So I'm going to open this from the original file that was sent to me. This is, I named it truck image, and the dimensions, I'll just mention this here. The dimensions are 1826 by 2634. That is the pixel size. So it is a large file. So when I open this, I double click on it to open. You can see it opens large. That is great. Opening large is most often better than opening small. However, you're going to notice that will also take longer to open. And I do get this low resolution message in the top, which means that if I tried to print it at this resolution, and we can actually kind of see it here, it is very pixelated at this size. That is not a problem for what we're going to work with it. So I'm just going to come out here and I'm going to zoom out so you can actually see how large this file is. So even when I click on it, it says it is 25 inches wide, 25.361 by 36.583. Now I'm going to show you the first thing I want to share is you could trace this at this size. If your image opens super, super small, I recommend tracing it at that size. If you enlarge it, it's going to pixelate even more, and that's going to give you more edit nodes and pixelation. So small images like 3 inches or smaller in that size, even, well, actually probably 5 inches or smaller, I would say trace at the size it opens. This large image, I'm going to show you what happens if I trace it at this size and if I reduce it. So keep in mind, I'm going to be creating this to be used for an HTV design or heat transfer vinyl for a shirt. So the size is going to be it depends on the size of the shirt, but no more than the 11.75 width is what I would recommend. That's what I do for larger shirts. So we're going to kind of keep in those guidelines and mindset when we create with this. So the first thing I want to show you is if I trace it at this size. Now I am using a software version of 4.5.812, and the next thing I'm going to share with you is not available in older versions of software, and I don't know which one it was implemented into. I think it was version 4.5. It might have been 4.4, but you'll have to look in your version and see if it's there. It's a really handy tool. So I'm going to come over to the trace panel. It looks like a butterfly or a piece of toast, depending on who you are. It is actually supposed to be a butterfly. I'm going to click on that. It opens up my trace panel, and you have all kinds of options. I'm going to select trace area, click on that, and then my cursor changes to this little plus sign. Now, because this image also has this little area here, I'm going to cut that kind of off. I don't need that in my trace window. So I'm simply going to trace around or draw a box with the trace tool around where I want it to trace. So you can see this is outside the edge. I would delete that anyhow, so I don't really need it. But I didn't grab this bottom portion here of that tire. I do want that. So I'm just going to adjust that a little bit so it gets all of the image that I want traced. And then I want to come in and I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. So I'm just using my click to zoom tool. And since this image is so large, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to see. We'll come in just a little bit more, but I want you to see a majority of the design. So there are a lot of different options in the trace panel, and you can play with those. Typically, I use one. I use the threshold and I use solid fill. If it doesn't give me the results I want, then I can go back and I can start playing around with other things. It gets really more complicated once you start changing things. And as I said, every design that you trace is going to be different. So there's no magic numbers that work for all designs. The thing I found that works the best for me is just simply adjusting the threshold up. And I use the little slider here. And what I'm looking for is I want the yellow to be as smooth as possible, but you're going to hit a certain point. Not with this image, we'll see it on the next one. Well, you kind of see it here. If I go up to 100%, it turns fuzzy again. Those edges are not smooth. So I don't want that. I want it to come back down, and I'm going to try for as smooth as possible. So before, when I tested this, before I recorded, it was about 87%, but I kind of did it backwards. I did the smaller image first. So 90%, let's go with 87%. I want to keep this the same for both examples that I'm going to show you. So I have 87% threshold. If I keep that and I choose trace, then when I come in here, I'm going to move the original away and I have my traced outline. Now, one way you can do this is to compare it by filling it with color, but I want to show you something first before we get there. If you double click on it, you can see it has a lot of edit points. More details in the description below on edit points, but those are the data points that the cutter needs to connect the dots. Literally, it's connecting dots. It's connecting those dots to make the shape that it is cutting out. That is the bare basics of edit points. You can change those edit points. So I'm going to just zoom in here just a little bit so we can take a closer look. My computer takes a little bit of time to process that because it is a large amount of data and it went too far. So let's zoom out here. Again, real time. I know that doesn't always work for everyone, but even my computer is taking time to process this. So it's not the Silhouette Studio software. That is a very data heavy file. And maybe I should not have tried to zoom in here, but we'll get there eventually. So here, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to click off of it. It's going to take a little bit to process. So once I undo that edit points, it's a little bit easier because those edit points were activated. That is more data that is computing at one time. That's my terminology. I'm not an IT person. So from a user perspective, more data is being presented on the screen. That makes it more, takes it longer to process because I had that. So if I clicked off of it, the zoom functions worked a lot easier. Now, if I double click on this again, I just want you to see how many edit points are in here. In the later versions of the software, at the bottom, you now have this node count. And if I can go back and research when that actually was implemented, I will put that in the description below as well. What you'll see here then, what's the important part that I want to point out is currently at the original size of this design, which is large, there are 24,528 nodes. That is a lot. So what I am going to do is I'm actually going to open this image again. I'm going to come over, so truck image. I am going to click on it to select it. And then I'm actually going to use this quick resize tool in the quick access toolbar. You can also access that over in the transform panel. Underneath your scale tools, you'll notice that the icons are the same. And you have these quick access buttons where you can scale it down by a percentage. Either way you access it, it's going to do the same thing. So I'm going to click 50% to start, and then I can move this kind of up here. And this time what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to rotate this just so it's easier to see. And there is our image. Now, I told you from the start that we're working with an HTV design. So typically when I am working with HTV, I don't do designs that are larger than 12 inches typically. So I'm usually working about 11.75. So that's what I'm going to work with in this and keep in mind. And I did ask the user specifically what they were using it for, because if they were trying to get a 3x3 decal out of this, it would be a lot more difficult. There would be a lot more cleanup required. So I have this image and I have it sized around the size that I might cut it at. I'm going to come over here to that trace tool again, the toast or the butterfly, whatever you see, and click select trace area. And then I'm going to draw my box around where I want it to trace. Now I'm not going to be able to get it exactly in the same since I eliminated this top portion, but I'm going to I'm going to try and come close. So if I select that and then just bump this down a little bit because I don't need the top of that little area of the photo. And then I'm going to change the threshold to 87%. So I'm keeping all of my factors the same. It smooths out those yellow lines just a little bit, and it is the same as our previous trace. I'm going to click trace. And then when I move this away, I can double click on it and bring up those edit points. The biggest factor here is you can see that it is now 11,627 edit nodes. That is a massive difference in the cutability and in the data in the file. Now, I'm curious about something here. So I'm going to come back here to the truck image, and I think this depends on your software version. I'm going to come back to the original size of the design, click off of it to deselect so the edit points are not activated. I'm going to zoom out here, and let's just rotate this so it's a little bit easier to see on the screen and matches the other one. So here's my original design. If I activate edit points, I'm going to write this down so I don't forget it. 24,528. If I click off, I want to see what happens. And I click back on to select it one time. If I grab this little selection box here and decrease that, it does exactly what I thought it would do. So you can notice that my design is scaling down when I use this selection box. However, all of those edit points do not recalculate when you scale that down. That means that all of those 24,500 plus edit points are now squished into a smaller space. And this is why you will hear your cutting machine go as it's cutting. I don't know if I did that quite right, but again, not edited video. But it sounds like it's stuttering when it's cutting. That is because there's a lot of edit points in that one spot, and it's just going to eat your vinyl up. I will 100%. If you cut this right now, scaled it down to the size you want to cut it at for a shirt, say you're cutting it at 12 inches wide, you are going to have a problem there because it's a massive amount of edit points. Those aren't necessarily needed. So that was another thing that I hadn't even thought to put in the video, but hopefully that will help in explaining why some images do not cut. I am going to close this. I'm going to save this so that if I need it, I'm going to come back to it. So truck image large. And then I'm going to close it so that my computer isn't having to retain all of that data while I'm working with this other file. So now we have our file that is massively smaller in the edit points. It is the same file. So if I click off to deselect it, I'm going to click back on it, and then I'm going to come up here to the quick access toolbar, and I'm going to choose black. Our original image is black. I'm going to choose black. This is going to give us a chance to see what the trace looks like, how it traced. I am going to remove the red line color so it's easier to compare. So now you can compare on the screen how this image looks compared to the original photo. You can also find the fill color panel over on the right side. It's the little artist palette. So either way you fill the color and take the line color. Line color is the next, line style panel is the next panel down. So quick access toolbar, it just depends on how you utilize the software. I started when there was only panels on the right side. Actually, I started in the software when everything was at the top. But with the 4.3 software version updates, they changed everything in the software. There's actually going to be additional changes coming in version 4.4 that will come out probably in 2025. Well, but you should still, if you get familiar with this version of software or whatever you're working, it should be a quick transition. So I just want to mention that if you are watching this video at a later date. So once you have this visual in front of you, now we can start working with the file to see how we can simplify it and get a better cut. It really depends on what your final results, what you want it to be. And every image is going to be different because not all images are going to have these artifacts. So the first thing I want to do is I am going to save this because it's a lot of data, and I want to make sure that if for some reason, let's cross our fingers and hope that my software does not close. My computer's pretty good about this, but I can also hear it running in the background. You probably can't because my microphone cancels that out. I'm going to take a quick drink. If you don't have something to drink, you can pause the video and get something. I don't want to edit this because I think that oftentimes there's a lot of steps that are missed, and some people don't need this detail, but I know a lot do. So the next steps I would take is I'm going to come in here, and what I want to do, oftentimes, depending on the size of the image, I will then make a copy. So copy and paste, there's about 10 different ways in the software. My favorite is to hold down the Alt key, or on a Mac, it's Option, and I'm just going to pull a copy over here. Now you do want to be careful because if it's very, very, very data heavy, first off, save your file because that will help in some of the processing because you'll always have a save point to go back to. And it doesn't have to remember everything. But the more copies you add on your page, that increases your file size. And it also increases the data that's in the file because you've now duplicated all of that data. But this way we can compare. So on this, I'm going to double click on this file. It's going to bring up all of those edit points. And edit points are great in being able to adjust a design. You can spend hours point editing. You can draw things with point editing. The biggest thing right here, the first step that I would suggest trying is we have this 11,600 edit points. I'm going to come over here to simplify. Now, in different versions of a software, it can vary in how it really simplifies. With the later versions and having this node count, you can actually see how it simplifies it, or how many nodes it does simplify. However, sometimes simplifying can change the shape of your design and make it not as desirable. So first thing, that's why I made a copy to compare. So I'm going to choose simplify. It's going to take it some time to process. That simplified it a lot. So it went from 11,600 to 2,100 nodes. That's a lot. Now, if I click off of it, I can compare how does it compare to the original trace. Did it lose too many details? You are the only one that can answer these questions. Sometimes it will massively change things. And I'm trying to see here. Let me draw. Let's try to make this as comparable as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to fill it with white, and I'm going to right click on it and send it back. That way we're comparing with the same background. We can kind of see it a little bit better. From a quick glance, I am not seeing things that are you have misshapen circles to start with. Nothing is a perfect circle. It doesn't really make the lines. I'm not seeing a massive change in shapes. It is a very distressed image to start with, but like I said, and I will say it probably a few more times in this video, every image is going to be different. I thought this was a great example, so I asked for permission to use it. So you can see compared on this is our original copy. So if I double click on it, all of those edit points. And actually, let's see if my computer will do this. Oh, wow. Okay, 11,627 edit points. If I double click on this one, 2130. So this one will cut so much better than the one on the right. Will it be successful in cutting? You actually don't know until you do the test cut. But we can do a few more things to simplify it a little bit more and hopefully increase your success on that. Now, I really like this look of this distressed image. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file. So I'm going to click on save. And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to choose file. Once it saves, file, save as, and then I'm going to make a new copy. So this is truck image small edits. And then on this one, I was going to delete it, but I actually need it for your benefit. I would delete it so that I'm working with a smaller file, especially if your computer is running. I'm going to keep it, but I won't. This is how I work. I make copies and I make sure that I have a working file, and then I will have a separate file for a cut file. If on the second file, I would delete that so I don't have it, but I need to keep it for your benefit. So you can see the difference as we're comparing. But especially if your computer is running or lagging a lot, you may want to eliminate some things, such as even this original here. I could get rid of that because I do have copies of that. So that's going to help in the data processing or what it has to remember. And every user's computer is different. And that's why we see so many posts and things about how a user's computer is reacting, and how we cannot always replicate the issue because our computer is different than your computer. So here I've taken the line color out and filled it with color. For the next steps, it is easier to work with if it does not have color. So I'm going to actually change the line color option here in the quick access toolbar, or on the right side is your line style panel with your line color. I'm going to turn it back to red, and then I'm going to use the fill color. I'm going to open the fill color panel on the right, or the quick access toolbar is where I usually access it now that I've gotten used to it. I'm going to choose that cross-hatched, and it's going to take the color out of it. And the reason I'm going to do this is now I'm going to take this file and I'm going to break it apart. This is a very complex thing for users to wrap their minds around. Compound paths are one of the most difficult things to understand. But once you start working with them, and sometimes it's a matter of just clicking buttons. Once you start working with them, you can do amazing things with them and you can change it. I'm going to zoom in on this design a little bit. So I'm just going to use my drag zoom. And the first thing, I like to start with the simplest things to edit first. So I'm going to actually double click on this again. And you can see I have this little section here at the top. I don't need that for the truck. I'm going to hold my shift key down with my edit points selected. You can select multiple edit points at one time if you hold your shift key down. Left click and drag select across what you want it to select. And then you can use the delete over here in the edit points panel, or you can press delete on your keyboard. If I click off of it, now you can see that shape a little bit easier. I can come in here and I can smooth this out a little bit more. So I'm just going to zoom in here so it's easier to see on the screen. Is this an edit point? Double click on it to edit that. So I see something on my screen that's actually like a dot that looked like an artifact to me. So you can't see that, but I just took it off my screen with my finger. So what we see here is we have this little edit point here. When I click on it, white means that that edit point is active. Red line on one side means that that is the direction it's going to be moving, or that's how it would move to the next edit point. So if I click delete, it moves to the next edit point on the right. This is the line between here is the edit point. I don't know if you can hear that, but there must be an airplane flying really, really low. Hopefully my microphone doesn't pick that up. Again, not editing this video. So if you do hear it, it's kind of an odd, we don't normally hear that as low. I'm going to also delete this one because do I really need it? And then you can continue to edit around. This creates kind of a little lump here. So I can click on that one and then I can grab these little blue points and I can move this kind of around, maybe smooth that out a little bit. So all of their bezel points these are your bezel points that give you control over what happens with that particular edit point. Now, depending on if it's a corner, if it's smooth, that depends on how it reacts when you move these blue little bezel points. So I can kind of move this one and I can smooth that out and then click off of it, and I can determine, do I like that? That actually looks like it smoothed out. So that is one way you can go around, and you could eliminate specific edit points. Like, do I really need this edit point here? Hit delete. Now, undo is going to be your best friend when you get into cleaning up things and designing. Once you start down this path, it is not going to take you as long every single time, because you're not going to be going step by step like I am. You're going to get in the habit of seeing what works. If it doesn't work, you can click undo. So for instance, if I click on this one down here, I'm going to come down just a little bit. If I were to delete this, this is a very important part of the shape of the truck. If I delete that, it makes it a straight line. That's not going to look right. So I'm simply going to come up here to undo, or Control Z, and I can put that back. So even if you decide after the fact that you don't like that, you can use undo and go back and try something different. I'm going to zoom out here just a little bit. So if I click off of that, you can kind of see that my truck, that area is now fixed more. Depending on the final result that you want with your image will depend on how much you smooth this out. If you want it to be super distressed, which I think looks really cool for this image, it would be very unique not everybody's going to have that design. This is your design, and it would be on your shirt. It would be unique, and a unique gift is what I'm trying to say. But you have some of these areas in here. If I double click on this, you can see I don't need those 2 edit points, so I could delete those. Delete it, see how that looks. It looks a little bit better. If you wanted to, you could come in here and you could smooth this out a little bit. Just move, play with the edit points. And you could spend all day doing this if you wanted to. And sometimes it's worth it. It just depends on what you want. So another thing I'm noticing right here while I'm here, I want to point this out. So we have this little area here in the lights. It actually is not connected. So sometimes you'll have to zoom in. I thought it was connected and it came around. Okay, so zoom in, that'll help. I'm going to fit to window so we can see this again. So now I've eliminated this here. So I start with the simplest things. I can eliminate that. Point editing can take a little bit of time, but again, once you start doing it, it will go much faster. The other thing that you can do, and this will just depend on your design. This is going to freak some people out when I do this, but it really helps if you just have the line color. This is where the compound paths come into play. So I am going to, right now this image is one layer, completely on one layer. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to choose Release Compound Path. Now, initially, and this could take time depending on your image, but now every single cut line that connects is its own separate piece. So essentially I could come in here and I could start selecting each one of those pieces, and I could fill each with a different color. So now you would have, let's just do it so I show it on the screen. So visual sometimes helps. So here, let's just choose this piece. I'm going to fill this with color, and then let's fill this background. So everything that is in this selection box here is going to be filled with color. That's that entire cut shape that connects. So in that case, that one all connects together in some way from the trace. So now on screen, since I've broken this apart, black is now on top of the gray. What we're going to work with this for is to easily eliminate some of the distressed or artifacts that we don't need in the image. So I'm actually going to hit undo here, but I wanted you to see it on the screen. So for instance, down here, if you wanted to have the ground showing, completely up to you. I think I'm going to leave that for now, but what I can do is I'm going to zoom in here. If you don't want it, you could just press delete. What I'm going to do is there are little artifacts here. Like you can see this little tiny dot. It's not going to cut. It's not adding anything to your image. It can be gone. So I can click on it. I can press delete and it's gone. Here's a little tiny circle. That's not adding anything to the image either. So what you can do is you can go through and you can eliminate these little tiny areas. If I hold my shift key down, click on another one, I can select 2 at a time and hit delete. So you can eliminate some of those artifacts throughout your design. So I just selected those little 2, and you can see here there are, okay, that one selected the large artifact. Or large piece, design piece. I don't want to do that. Zoom in if you need to. So I'm going to work through this, hold my shift key down. So if you do want to speed up the video while I do this, I will talk while I do this. So I may say something that you might miss, but I understand that not everybody needs the step-by-step. So speed up the video. Now, I don't want to take out too much without checking my design first. So I'm going to work around this and just eliminate the ones that I know I don't really need. And what I mean by that is if I delete a large chunk that makes up the actual structure of the image, that can affect the final result that I get for the image that cuts. So for instance, let's see here if I can point out something. So if I come in here and I were to delete part of this little circle here, that will affect the final outcome because that's part of the lights. So it's a vital portion in this image to me. But I can come in and I can delete these little tiny artifacts that I know are not going to cut well. So I have a little tiny one over here. And again, it depends on how much of a distressed look you want. So I'm just going to work my way around this and try to make this a better cut file for use with HTV. Sometimes I do leave some artifacts in there just to give it a unique look. But the smaller your artifacts are, the more likely it could cause issues with your finished cut. And again, undo is going to be your best friend if you do select something that is not what you want to delete. Since I'm in here, I will also say if there is a piece that is small that you want to keep, but you want to give it a higher chance of success in cutting or make it a more prominent piece in your design, you can click on it. You could use the little bounding boxes to increase the size of that. And in this case, this is your top rack for the truck. So I think it would help in some of the definition to keep it so it doesn't look like it's a completely solid piece. And then I can delete some of these other little artifacts around that aren't going to add much to that design. So that's, and I think especially if you are making it for a gift or you, undo, Control Z, I grabbed the wrong piece. Sometimes that happens if they're close together. There's a few more back here in the window that I want to eliminate. I think sometimes, depending on what the project is, it can be very well worth it to spend the time cleaning it up, especially when you see the look on somebody's face when they see it. Now on this piece, since I'm in this location, I'm going to zoom in here. You can kind of see that there's this little loop-de-loop. Do I need it in my design? I can come in here, I could delete these edit points and just smooth this part out. I don't think it's going to add or take away just by eliminating that little piece. That could be difficult to cut. Or you have some of these in here. If I double click on that, you have some of those that are really, really thin. Simply by moving your edit points just a little bit and adjusting those, you could increase the chances of success with your file to be cut. So you don't have as many thin strips. Whether you're cutting out of heat transfer vinyl can sometimes be, oh, I'm still in edit points. Heat transfer vinyl can be easier to cut thin pieces, but you also need to keep in mind that the surface area of your cut piece, if it's small, that also means that surface area of adhesive is small as well. So whether it will stick to your material longevity, how long is it going to stick with that little piece of the surface area, small surface area of adhesive. The bigger factor when you're cutting things out of adhesive vinyl is it's the same concept, but I think it doesn't always hold thin lines as well, especially if it's being handled or washed, or so those are things to keep in mind. I'm just going to continue to clean up this file. The active edit point is not the one I want to delete, so I'm going to come over here and delete this one. And then I can kind of zoom out here, and do I need that edit point? Delete it. I don't think it's going to change the shape of it too much. Do I need this one? I kind of like some of this dimension in here for that, so I'm going to leave some of that. But like I said, every single file is going to be different, but I'm already starting to see a major difference here in just cleaning up this file. Now, I mentioned this area in here before. It's small. Do I need that? So here's another trick for you. I think it's a necessary piece to complete this light. I can work with it two ways. So in this case, so each of these pieces is a separate piece. I can hold my shift key down and I can select them. If I don't want to draw another shape, I want to kind of work off of what is already there. What I can do is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to activate the edit points by double clicking. I'm going to adjust some of these edit points up. So I have this light shape, and kind of thinking to a car light shape. It's going to be, the same, kind of the similar shape at the top and the bottom. So what I can do is I can move these edit points, just adjust them a little bit. I still want to kind of keep that, uneven type of shape here, curved shape. I can click on the line to add an edit point. And if I bring it over top of the original, this larger piece, and then I'm going to click and add another edit point and drag that down so it's overlapping. So now currently I have those two shapes, this shape, hold my shift key down, those two shapes are overlapping. What I can do here is, since I moved that design, I started with what was originally traced and I just added to it. I'm going to right click and choose weld. That's going to give it a, add to that shape, gives it a little more uniformity, and I don't have that little tiny piece that may not cut. Then I can come in here and I can kind of modify this a little bit more. Do I need that piece in there? Do I need all of these little edit points? So there's like 3 in here. Do I need those all? I don't think so. So I can kind of adjust those. And I'll delete this one. Click on that one and delete it. And then if I zoom out, I can kind of see that. Now, I think I'll come in here, I'll delete this edit point, make that light just a little bit more round-ish. I do want to just keep, I liked the distressed image, so I'm going to keep that. And then I will send this to the original owner and see what they want to do. So I think, let's see here. Do I have, I kind of think that is part of the images that might be, and the thing about this is I can start with deleting these areas that I see that are problems initially. And then I can test it and I can go back. So I'm going to actually eliminate this in here. Hold my shift key down, drag select across multiples, press delete. I think that's going to give it a little bit more definition and success in cutting. So let's zoom out here to see our image. I think I want to clean this up a little bit more, and this dot here. Ultimately, you're going to be the deciding factor in what is going to work for your design. I don't think that's going to add anything. If I wanted to, I could kind of bring this down here a little bit more, make it so it's a little bit more cuttable, and then delete. I'm in edit point mode, so I just have to delete that. I don't think these are going to add anything to the original design. And then there was another spot over here. Some of these, I think it needs just to keep the design, but we'll test that. I'll show you how I'm going to test that. But up here, I don't think I need all of these. And this is where the, I need those. Let's just make this a little bit bigger. Don't need this one. Making it a bit bigger is going to increase the success for your cuts. So let's zoom out here and see how it looks. And we'll test this in just a second to see if it's what we want. I'm not seeing all, oh, I do see one spot. Okay, so on our original image, this section here is not really part of the truck. So I'm going to come in, and while I have it where I have it, I'm going to eliminate that. And, you know, I know the video is long. It's going to be helpful for some users, and other users have already checked out. But every single image is different. So I actually don't need this piece. And this is where you are going to have to kind of maybe jump back to compare. I can come in here. Oops, don't move the whole line. Left click and drag across those two. I want to connect this undercarriage. So I'm going to come out here and zoom. I want to connect this undercarriage here, but I don't need, I need it to go around the fender and the tire, but I don't need this loop-de-doo. So I eliminated that. And I'll try to do it zoomed out so I can compare here. What I can do is, instead of deleting those, let's just move them to start with. So I'm going to move this up here. And I do want to stress, anyone can do this. It takes practice. There is no magic button. I'm going to delete this one. It just takes practice. And the biggest factor is that it is different for all images. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. I do have some a little like hook in here that I probably don't need, so that smooths that out just a little bit, but still gives it some definition. So let's and this is real time. So this is kind of small to cut. I'm not sure I need it in from the original image. Okay. I think let's come in here. Real time. You are seeing me real time edit. I want this to be more successful in here, but maybe I don't need both of them. But it needs some of that character. That's the word I'm looking for. Okay. Sometimes fit to page is easier, and then I can zoom back in again. Okay, so now here's the trick. When you get the majority of what you feel is the, let's close this. When you get the majority of what you feel are the artifacts or the pieces that you don't need for your cut to be successful, zoom out, look at it a little bit closer because I already see one here. I need to keep the definition here, but is that too close? So I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to move this out a little bit, and you can continue to play with this all you want, but I'm going to show you how you can see what it looks like now that you've kind of edited that. Does it still have the same character? I'm going to left click and drag around the entire design. So now you can see all of the little pieces that are left are all individual pieces. I could fill every single piece, every one that has a gray selection box around it, I could fill with color. That is not what I want. It's not going to give me the comparison I want. So what I need to do is I am left clicking, drag across the entire design so everything is selected. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose make compound path. This is going to take all of those pieces and it's going to cookie cut it out of the original image. The way you can see what your design is going to look like is then we're going to fill it with color. So I'm going to fill it with black. Then I'm going to take the line color out just because it makes it easier to compare. So now, you know, I have a much cleaner image. I don't have all of these. It's really hard to see on the screen. Let me bring this in a little bit closer. Try to make it as large as possible on the screen for you to see. So you can see I have eliminated a lot of things. Maybe I need to bring this up just a little bit so it's in line with the back tire, which is actually something, since it's simple. Sorry about that. That's an alarm. I need my oil changed. Since it's simple, I can do it while it's filled with color. The reason I take the color out is when we're working and having to release that compound path. I'll show you on the screen. If I were to release the compound path right now, I'm taking it from that single layer. I'm breaking it up into pieces. If I release that compound path, it's just a big blob. So that is why I take the color out to work with the image and all the little pieces. And I'm going to undo that so it comes back into this. So now if I activate the edit points, I still have those edit points. And what I can do is so my tire ends about right here. I'm going to bring up this edit point here. And I still want it to look natural, but I need to smooth this line out so it looks like it's the back side of the undercarriage. So it's on the opposite side. It's not on the front. It's on the back side where that tire is. So I'm actually going to zoom in here. And I may not even need these edit points here. So I'm going to left click and drag select around them and press delete. So that gives it a little bit smoother edge there. And I think it works better. If needed, I could add an edit point there and just kind of bring that around. So now let's zoom out. And I think that looks a little bit better. Again, total user perspective, you know, your opinion is going to vary from my opinion in what works. So I have cleaned this image up a lot. I do see some artifacts right in here that I probably don't need. Do I need all of these artifacts around the license plate? I kind of like them. Will they cut? That is your number one factor. I probably don't need this little artifact here. So I would continue to do the same steps that I've gone through and see what is going to make it cuttable, a cuttable file, without losing the character of the design. And that's what you can get when you're going back and forth between releasing the compound path, deleting pieces. One thing I will also mention here is that, for instance, on this little, I don't know if it was an antenna or it's the side of the photo. I'm not sure. It could be a structure in the background of the photo that traced as well. You could try the knife tool. The knife tool is often very data heavy, and I find that deleting edit points, even selecting multiple edit points, can be less taxing on computers in the software. So I don't often use the knife tool if I can help it. Sometimes it does help to cut out a massive chunk of the design, but often I can usually find a different way around that. Knife tool just is very, very data heavy. But I can look at this and I can come in here. I think I could clean up some of this to make it a little bit more cuttable. So if you want to stick around, I am going to just continue on this. I do want to say, if you're still here, the number one way to determine if it's going to be a cuttable file is to actually test and cut it. I think this would be fine on a high quality HTV and with your test cuts that you know are going to work for that material. So you do end up with several factors. The first is going to be your actual design and if it is a cuttable file. So what I am going to do is I will continue on with this video to share how I'm going to finish this out. Then I will send it to my client. It's not even a client, I don't sell. It's just a group member who I thought this was a great example. I'm going to send it to her, give her a visual look, see how she likes it, and if that's what she is looking for. I might cut this. The thing about cutting it is then what do I do with that HTV? It's not my design, it's not my file. I do think it's a neat file and very unique. So you can do so much in the Silhouette software. So now let's get on to how I will finish this out. I'm going to add that line color in there. For those who want to stick around, I'm going to take the fill color out, and then I'm going to right click and choose release compound path. So again, it's broken up that file and it is now gone from this one layer outline design, and it is now all individual pieces. Just a quick drink here. So I said there were a few areas here. Actually, the first one, let's see if I compare, I don't need this up in here. So let's come up here. Some of these, I don't think that they add anything to the actual design. This is kind of a thin line here. So what I might do is zoom in a little bit closer. That might be pretty thin to cut. So I can just kind of, I want to keep the shape as much as possible so I don't change the structure of the design. You know, because some of this is unique in that as long as there's not too many edit nodes inside of that corner, it should cut okay. So I'm going to come out, zoom out a little bit, click off edit points, and then let's double check in this area over here. Okay, it's not too many edit nodes. If you had multiples in one corner, then I would say definitely want to change that. So click off of it. Oops. Now okay. I know there was something else, this little area down here in the tire. And I think I can kind of edit that area. I want the shape, but I don't know that I necessarily need all of the little pieces, or like this up here. I might move this out a little bit to give it a little bit greater chance to cut. Same with this, just a little bit, you know, adjustment there. Do I need that one? It's still kind of goofy, but I think I can get away. Do I need that little tiny hook in there? It looks like I have 2 edit points. I can delete one. I think that's going to be great. Kind of looking here. Do I need that one? See, I think you can really help the success of your machine to be cut. So I have several in here that I want to, I don't know if I want to move them out. I don't want to change the shape too much, but this is going to be thin to cut. So, but I do kind of think I need it. So you can just kind of play with it. This I don't need. I don't think I need. Or I need to make it bigger. Okay. And then this little hook here, whoops, Control Z, try to select those. I can just bring that down. Kind of give it a little bit more space so that it has success cutting. And then the same thing down in here. I mean, I like it. Maybe I need to make it a little bit more dramatic or eliminate one. Select all of these and maybe just move them out a little bit. And this one. So I'm really not changing it too much, but I'm trying to identify areas that might be a problem and eliminate those areas before I use my vinyl. And then again, the ultimate way to compare would be to select everything, left click, drag across everything, right click, choose make compound path, and then fill this with color. And then sometimes the red can be distracting. So what I can do, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, try to zoom in as much as possible. And on this one, I'm going to take the red out. So I've eliminated a lot, just comparing the two really quick, because I would spend a lot more time doing this, and I will probably clean up just a little bit more before I send the file. But you can, I mean, you can see there's a lot of things that could have affected your cutability. Like this piece was just, it's not even needed. It's something that the trace picked up in the photo. I don't know, maybe there's a person laying underneath it. No, I don't know. It could be just a dark spot that was underneath it. Obviously there was some light, some white in there that it picked up, but it's not part of the truck itself. You could come in here if you don't want the ground. Kind of makes the truck look like it's flying, but you could take those out. This piece here and this piece are two separate. Once you release that compound path, you could easily delete those. This area here is connected to that tire, so you would have to edit those points and then kind of make that shape that tire. But I mean, if you wanted to make it a flying car. But you can see there all of these little artifacts that are inside of these bits and pieces that would affect your cutability. And would they cut? They won't cut, and they probably won't stay in place, but they could get gummed up on your blade. They could just cause tears in the vinyl. It could affect the next cut piece that it goes to cut, especially if a piece of vinyl is sticking to it. So the more you can clean up the file, the better. Now here, let's compare them. So if I double click on this one, bring up the edit points, it has the 11,627. If I come over here and double click, it has 1,847. So we went, and I'd have to go back into the video. I think it was 2,200 or something like that. I'd have to go back because I did not write that down. But we have eliminated those edit nodes that would make it. Now, one more step that you could try. This may be where we see that it changes the shape. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to save it because I did not save that entire time. So that is on me. Good thing it did not crash. So what I'll do is I will make a copy. And actually what I'll do is I am going to, here's my original. Here's the one I've edited. They both fit kind of sort of on here. We'll get those to fit so we can compare backgrounds. Here is the copy. If I then, I'm going to double click to activate those so you can see all of those edit points. So we still currently have 1800. For a distressed design of this, I think it would be successful cutting at this size. If you tried to scale it down, you may run into some issues because it is condensing those edit points. Remember that it does not recalculate those edit points when you scale it down. So I'm going to try this and see what happens. We're going to simplify it. It went, oh, let's hit undo because I forgot already. 1847. Okay, writing it down. That's the only way I can remember. I'm going to click off of it, click back on it one time. Edit points are still, oh, they're not active. I have to do the edit. It has to be in edit point mode. Simplify. Knocks it down to 1573. Okay, so that's a few less. But does it change the shape too much? My initial response just visually was yes, it did. I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Do you think that final simplification actually changed the shape? This is where your opinion, where your eye comes into place. Did it change the shape? Did it alter it enough to make a difference in that it doesn't look as good? What are you going for? Will that design work for you? For some reason, and I cannot verbalize it, I don't like the simplification. I don't know why, but I can't tell you off the top of my head, but for some reason it looks different to me. Some of the shapes seem a little bit off, but if I close my eyes and I look again, you know, sometimes your eyes can play tricks on you too. So bottom line is every single design you do is going to be different, and it is only you who can do this. And you can do this, every single person. And that's why I did this hour-long video. I did not know how long it would be. And I know some people did not stick around for it, but you can do this. You can take the time, you can learn how to use the tools in the Silhouette Studio software to work for you. Undo is your best friend. Some things might work on one design and they might not work on another design. Now, if I were to try to cut this on a 3x3 decal, then I would need to do a lot more simplification to it, and I would have to work with it in order for the design not to be changed. So you need to keep in mind the size that you are trying to create at. And if you're really trying to do a distressed or detailed design at a super small size, that may not work well. But I will put additional tips in the description below of tips that you can use, which are some of what I've shown you today on cutting for small fonts and designs. So with all of those tips, I hope that has helped you to see some of the steps that you might take and see how it can change that image and still make it, this is going to be more successful than the original design at the original size that was traced with that 24,000 or whatever it was edit nodes. So that is just going to eat up your vinyl. And that's not the machine's fault. That is the data that it is reading. Again, it is connecting the dots. Literally, it has to connect those dots to make that shape. And that is the entire basis of what edit nodes are, or edit points are. It's the data that the machine is reading to connect the dots to make a shape and cut that out. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear if this has helped you in being able to understand how the trace tools work, how edit points work, compound paths, and there will be more information in the description below. Now, as I mentioned, the only way to know if it's going to cut is if you actually cut it. So make sure to do your test cuts first. My blade is older, so it is going to probably be different settings. So test cuts are very important, especially for distressed designs. And then I sent this to cut. The other thing I want to share with you, I'm not going to make you watch the whole cut, is that anytime you have, the more detailed the design is, the longer it's going to take to cut. So I did not look at how long this took to cut, but it was several minutes at least. So just make sure that you are aware of that. That is not a bad thing if you get a good cut. So test cuts are very important, and then it's going to take longer to cut distressed designs or larger designs. Okay, now I'm going to, this is the first time I've cut it. This is the design I simplified, not the final design I showed you that had the 1100, but this was like the, I'll have to look at the count. I do want to point out a few things before, but I am going to weed this on camera just so you can see it. I wasn't sure in the beginning that I was actually going to test cut it because I didn't have a purpose. But one, I will tell you, my blade, I shared my settings that I used for my test cut. Test cut was great. My blade is older, so my settings are higher. If I had a brand new blade, maybe I would not have lost some of these tiny pieces, but maybe I would have. So I'm not sure. Let's hope that the camera can focus, trying to show. Let's see. Okay, so here it looks like I can kind of see it on camera. It kind of lifted there. We'll see how, I think that piece is a piece, I have to go back and see what I need to weed out, so I compare it on the screen to what I'm doing. So I'll start first by weeding out the outline, and then we'll go from there. But there are a couple pieces that lifted, so you can see just little tiny, so maybe those pieces either need to be enlarged when I am doing the edits, or maybe they're not necessary at all. So let's go ahead. I'm going to first take this off my cutting mat. I'm going to flip it over and peel my cutting mat away. That's going to help it release from the cutting mat. And for a detailed design like this, I probably would recommend a cutting mat as long as it fits on there. Just simply for the fact that it's going to hold your materials more securely. Yes, you can cut without a cutting mat, and I do often, but I just find that especially for a detailed design like this, that having that stability of the cutting mat, it just helps so your material doesn't flex as much. But I'm just going to do this on camera, kind of keeping in line with the real time. There is no movie magic here. Whether it worked or not, this will help me to, it doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It means that I need to learn. If it doesn't work, I need to learn from that and adjust depending on what happens. So, and what I mean by that is, if my design did not cut cleanly, that means that I need to maybe start with a new blade, or I need to test cut more. It is cutting cleanly. I am using Caesar Easy Weed HTV, so I'm going to weed out this outline. So when things go wrong, it does not always mean that, it doesn't always mean you did something wrong. It doesn't always mean, usually it is something in the setup. I will say that. So something in the setup that needs adjusted. And as you do it more and more, you will learn. I hope I'm on camera here when I'm doing this. It's very hard to see and do both. But you can see it's weeding easily, so my cut is pretty good. It's not too deep. If your cut is too deep, you will find that your HTV or your material is going to buckle. That is going to be your #1 cut issue if it is. That's not the design. You just have to eliminate what are the possibilities of the design. Now, this is quite a detailed design. It is going to take me time to weed it, so I don't want to do that specifically, the whole thing on camera, but I'll just come in here and you can see I can start taking out pieces. Now, this one is very detailed. So what I would do is, in order to see what I want to weed out, I want to take this and I want to compare it to my online image on my software. So there are some pieces that I can definitely see that I need to weed out because it's the outline. So I want to keep that outline. And I mess up all the time. Even if I'm comparing, I might weed the wrong thing. And then that's, you know, it's not a waste of materials. It can be if you continue to do the same things and you don't fix what might be the issue. That is when I think it's a definite waste of materials, is when you continue to do the same thing over. Happens to us all. I'm not saying I'm any different. If you continue to cut a design, look at that. Oh, that actually turned out really good. Sorry, after talking for an hour, my voice is kind of wobbly. But you can see this piece came from somewhere. I don't know where. It could have popped off down here. That just means that it's not. And the Caesar Easy Weed HTV does have a sticky carrier sheet. So, but I don't want that on there since I don't want it to transfer. I do want to show you some of this in real time though. And then, but if you've ever cut a distressed design, you know that it takes time. So this would take me, and you want to take the time. It's definitely worth it to take the time. So here's a close-up if the camera will focus. Let's see. So my little lights, the definition with the little dots, these ones might stay, they might pop up. These ones didn't even stay for the cut. So that could be either, and then there's a couple here. You can see here. Now I can even see my cut lines inside of the carrier sheet. So maybe my settings were a little bit too deep. It might not be the design, but those are really, really super tiny pieces. So what I'm going to do is I am going to weed this design. I'll time lapse and we'll see how long that takes me. I'll try to time lapse it, trying to record with the camera. And then I'll come back with the finished, just so you're not having to watch the whole thing. Now, weeding just takes practice, and I actually didn't end up having to take it to my computer. I switched around to the back so I wasn't in front of the camera and was coming at it from a different direction. And with the light that I had going on, good lighting is really important with weeding. And then I grabbed a lint roller because then that makes it easier for me to stick the HTV, because it can be staticky. So it can just stick to the tool. So that can also be a help when you are weeding. I know some people do like to watch this process. So it is a time lapse that I've sped up even more. But once you get going with it, it's really easy. And make sure you're comfortable. With me being behind the camera or behind the table there, I was bent over, and it did take quite a while to weed it, but take your time, because if you mess up, then you have to recut it and start all over again. So I did take my time through this entire process, but wanted to share that as well. So here are a few more tips. Okay, now that the weeding process is done, let's take the test cut off so it doesn't distract us. I want to point out a couple things here. And like I said, the only way you know if a design you've cleaned up is actually going to work, it's being stubborn here, is whether the pieces will stay put when it's cut. So let's zoom in. I'm going to try to do this a little bit closer up without shaking the camera. You know, the pieces in the lights, let me bring this in. You can see that it cut my carrier sheet. So I know where those pieces are. Those were a little bit too small. They did not stick around. 2 out of the 3 pieces in this light did not stick around. What I would do is I think I want those. So I'm going to go into the design and I'm going to make those larger, and then they should stay put. As you can see, I've got a couple missed here. I can make those larger as well, and I can bring, it gives it the characteristics. It's, you know, it's just depends on what you want in your design. So here's a little tiny piece. I don't think I got weeded out. It's really, really super tiny. But I also think when I flip this over, you'll see, let's just put that to the side. You'll see that even those little pieces can give it a unique look. So some of those you may want to keep. And let's see, there's a couple others. Like this piece down in here, it's really super tiny and it was just like a sliver. I could probably go in here and make this a little bit bigger just to give it a better success in cutting. This looks like just a bubble in the HTV in case you can see that on the screen. It's not an actual cut part. But let's see, I'm trying to point out if there was any others that really, I feel like this is, nope, that's part of the design, maybe. I'll have to go verify. Actually, I don't think this is part of the design. I think it's a little tiny dot that got stuck there. So you want to make sure to get any of those. Is it on? Nope, it's still on here so that it doesn't stick to my final design. So just some tips that once you've cut it, then you can kind of go back in and see what might need edited on that design to make it more of a success. But otherwise, let's take a look out at this. So just a few things that I'll point out here. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to edit the little dots in the lights because I think it's a detail that should be there. And then there's a piece here that I'm going to edit and make it larger because I think that it is a good detail to keep. And then, you know, you can just do, I think I need this piece here. Maybe it needs to be just a little bit larger for success. It did cut and it weeded well for my settings. So it stayed there, but maybe just giving it more chance of being a successful cut, I could make that just a little bit bigger. I think it's important because it's part of this shape of the truck to line up with the lights. It really just depends on what you are planning to do with the entire design and what the final result you want to be. Now, I know this was very specific for the user because it was an actual image of a vehicle that they have. So it is unique. It's not something that everybody can do because they don't have a cutting machine. But it is something with a little bit of work. You can make very unique gifts and be successful in doing that. I hope these tips have helped, and I am probably the worst salesman ever, but if you are interested in more step-by-step videos, I do have silhouette classes that are step-by-step like this. It just depends on the project, but we do go step-by-step from start to finish. In those step-by-step classes, there's a link in the description below. I'll also put a coupon code in there for anyone who's interested as well. I'm going to go do a little bit more editing on this before I send it back to the user. But if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. There's also additional information linked in the comments below. I'm going to press this on a shirt and I'll give you a glimpse at that final project here. It turned out pretty cool and I like the final result. Thanks for joining me and have a great day.